I was washing dishes when it happened for the first time. It started with small stomps on the wooden floor. It kept me guessing on what it was because I live alone with no pets. It must have been noises from the house settling, I thought. One night while watching TV, I could swear I heard whispering behind me. It scared the living crap out of me. I couldn't make out where exactly the noises were coming from, but they were getting more and more intense, scratching and whispering at the same time. It was like I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but it was definitely happening. It has been like this every single night, but the noises change sometimes. There are nights I listen to the pipes, like someone is hitting them. Other nights come the whispers and loud stomps on the floor. It's like other people are living here with me. I am already spooked, but I am trying to be rational about this. Also, I cannot move out because I have nowhere else to go, and I put my money in this house. Now, if this wasn't enough, a few nights ago I started having weird dreams that happened in my house. It started with the door under the stairs, the one that leads to the basement. It was just me staring at the door, but something felt different. It was like the door was calling to me. I have been several times in my basement, but never felt like this. It was like a dark aura was around the door. It made me not want to go to the basement again, or even get close to that door. Luckily, I mostly use the basement for storage, so I don't really have to use it often. I kept dreaming about the door, always thinking there would be something reasonable that could explain what was happening. That was until my last dream. The door started opening and I got closer and peeked inside. That's when I saw pairs of eyes coming from the darkness below. And behind them, slowly I started making out a creature with horns. I woke up at that moment in horror. What are these nightmares? What is happening to me? Is my basement door some kind of gateway to somewhere? I don't know what to do. This story happened to me when I was 13 years old. It was Friday night and my parents were allowing me to stay home alone for the first time. They were also taking my little baby sister over to my grandparents. So for the next several hours, I was going to have the house to myself. I didn't waste any time getting the night started as soon as they left. I watched a marathon of horror movies on cable while I proceeded to eat a combination of French bread pizza along with other junk food from the pantry. I also remember drinking liters of soda as well. And since this was before smartphones, I decided to put the laptop on a folding tray next to the couch so I could surf the net while I watched movies and ate. It was basically pure heaven for a kid my age. But after a few hours into the night, I started to hear what sounded like footsteps above me on the second floor. I also started feeling a little creeped out for some reason, but I figured it was because it was the first time I was staying home by myself. The horror movies I was watching were definitely not helping either. However, just as I was about to dismiss the feeling of uneasiness, I heard something from upstairs. Even though it took a few seconds to process it, it sounded exactly like my mom. I muted the TV to see if the sound would happen again. After a couple seconds of hearing nothing, I assumed it was just my ears playing tricks on me. But before I could unmute the TV, I heard it again. "Jeremy, come upstairs," it said, sounding like my mom. I shot up from my seat, shocked and confused at what I just heard. Did my parents come back already? I said to myself. I thought maybe that I didn't hear them coming home because the TV was on too loud. I made my way upstairs to greet my family and find out why they were back earlier than expected. But as soon as I got to the second floor, I realized how all the lights upstairs were still off. And as I proceeded to open all the doors to the bedroom, there were no signs of anybody being home. I was beyond confused at that point. I was sure I'd just heard my mother saying my name. Was I just hearing things? I thought to myself. Maybe the horror movies were really affecting me more than I thought they would. But as soon as I thought I might be going crazy, that's when I hear something that I'll never forget. I would hear my mother's voice again, but this time it sounded sinister. And worst of all, it was right behind me. "Jeremy, turn around." My body felt like it was full of pins and needles. Something felt wrong. I was petrified. I whipped my head around to see who was standing behind me, but when I did, there was nobody there. I quickly ran downstairs, not daring to look back again. I was too terrified at the thought that if I did, I would see something horrible right behind me, chasing me. When I reached the living room, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I didn't know whether to run out of the house or just call my parents. But before I even had a chance to decide, that's when I started to hear voices all around me. This time, it sounded like both my father and my mother saying my name. I even heard what sounded like the cries of my baby sister. By that point, I couldn't move. I was frozen. I honestly thought I was going to die. Looking for anything that could help me, I grabbed a crucifix that was on the wall nearby. Even though I was never really religious, at that moment, I was desperate. The voices started to sound like they were coming closer and closer. I closed my eyes and started to pray, and just as it felt like the voices were about to close in on me, it stopped. By then, I couldn't hear anything other than my prayers and heart beating. And even though I was so afraid that I was shaking, I mustered up the courage to open my eyes. Fortunately, there was nobody in the living room but me. Even then, I couldn't convince myself to move and run out of the house. I was too scared that the voices would start again. While I was nervously looking around, I noticed something on the dresser. Sitting atop it was an old wooden statue that my parents had bought from an estate sale a few weeks ago. I remember noticing how ever since they bought it, weird things had started happening around the house, but nothing to the extent of what I just experienced. Before I could even think further, that's when the sounds of a baby crying started again from upstairs. And then shortly after, something that sounded like a group of footsteps from the second floor slowly made their way towards the top of the stairs. Not giving it a second thought, I quickly grabbed the statue and threw it to the ground, smashing it. Just as I did, the sound stopped. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the sidewalk in front of our house, waiting for my parents. When I told them what had happened, not only did they not believe me, but they never let me stay home alone again until years later. They also grounded me for breaking the statue, but I didn't mind since nothing happened again after that night. Something that did happen because of that incident, however, is that to this day, I started going to church more regularly.
This happened when I was 12 years old. I was living with my father in a small place in India. There weren't a lot of houses nearby. We were pretty much isolated and surrounded by wilderness. One rainy night, me and my father were watching TV on the couch when we heard a knocking at the door. That was very odd, because not only we didn't have a lot of visitors, but it was nighttime. Anyway, my father got up and went to the door. I quickly followed him but stayed behind him. Before he opened the door, he asked who it was, and we heard a voice of a woman. She said she was just trying to find shelter from the rain and that she got lost in the woods. My father, being a good man that he is, decided to open the door. As he opens the door, we could start seeing the woman outside. She was soaking wet, and her clothes were torn apart. My father quickly told her to get in and found her some clothes to put on. My father told me to go to sleep, but I was curious with that woman being there, so I pretended I went to sleep and stayed watching them both. My father sat close to her and started speaking to her. He asked questions like what she was doing there at that time of the night, or if she was alone, but to no avail. Once she got inside and by the fire, she was just silent, facing the fire. A few minutes go by, and my father gave up on trying to speak to her. So he gets up and prepares himself to leave the room when she starts mumbling something. He stopped and looked at her. I couldn't really understand what she was saying, but I believe she kept repeating the words, "I lost him." My father sat down again by her side and tried to speak to her, but she kept looking at the fire, emotionless, and kept mumbling what I think was the same words. I had a bad feeling about this. Something was off about that woman, and I was worried with my father's safety. The mumbling continued a few more seconds. My father then tried to touch her shoulder, to have her attention, and as soon as he touched her, she quickly turned her head to him. This time, she had a different look. Her eyes were bloodshot red, and she started getting up. And to this day, I swear what happened next is true. When she got up, her feet weren't touching the ground. She was levitating, and that's not all. Her face was completely different from before. She looked like a witch. Her hair turned gray and old, and her face wrinkled. I ran to my father, and together we ran out of the house, leaving that creature alone there screaming. I remember running that entire night with my father, looking for a safe place to stay, and after many, many miles of running, we encountered a local village. My father and I never spoke about this with each other, and I sincerely hope we never encounter that thing ever again.
A certain day after waking up, I saw a few differences around my bedroom. I mean, my phone was in a different place, my bedroom door was open, and I always close it before sleeping. Among other things. I took it as something normal. Maybe I forgot to close my bedroom door and left my phone on top of the table. Still, I wasn't very sure of myself. At night, after dinner, I usually sit down to relax and watch some Netflix. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake an eerie feeling of being watched all the time. Something was off. But I live in a small apartment, so it's almost impossible for someone to hide and not be seen. I live on the 3rd floor, so no one can watch me through the windows. I tried to forget about it and just watch the movie. Later in the night, I was already in bed. Still, couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. But I knew there was no one there. It was all in my head. This time, I made sure the door was closed and my phone was right beside me. In the morning, I wasn't going to forget about it. Not this time. Next day comes, and I look at my side to check my phone. It was there. I smiled in relief when I saw it, but when I got up, I looked at the door, and it was open again. I was in shock, because there was no way it happened accidentally. I mean, how? It was closed before sleeping. I got up and peeked through the door into the hallway that goes into the living room. I saw nothing, but that eerie feeling was still there. With much effort, I walked to my living room and checked around. Nothing was out of place, at least, at first. I dressed quickly and went to work. I needed to get out of there and just forget about it for a second. I kept telling myself there was something wrong with the door. I decided tonight I was going to lock it, and that way it was impossible to open. Night comes again. Tonight, I felt different, much more anxious, nervous and afraid, like I was expecting something to happen. I go to bed earlier and lock myself in the bedroom. This time, the door won't open, I tell myself. I go to bed, and after an hour or so of trying, finally I fall asleep. But it wasn't for long. 3 a.m. comes, and I wake up. Not because of noises or anything, I just woke up. That eerie feeling came back. I look around my bedroom, but I don't see anything. The door remains closed, and that's a relief. But as soon as I lay eyes on it, something happens that scares the living hell out of me. The door slowly starts opening, doing a terrifying creaking sound. At this point, I am in absolute panic inside, but at the same time, frozen on my bed. I get myself under the covers and stay very still. Maybe it's over. Maybe it's just an old door that keeps opening. There is nothing there. That's when things got worse. Another terrifying sound can be heard. Footsteps. I couldn't see who was walking, but I understood it was coming in my direction. I am crying under the sheets. The sound of the footsteps stopped right by my side in bed. I don't have the courage to lower the sheets, but I know someone or something is just by my side, looking at me.
If you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's an easy way for those interested in my work to see new exclusive content and updates before anyone else. By contributing as little as $1 per month, patrons will enable me to dedicate more of my time to creating by helping cover the many costs incurred for my work. You have access to a Discord chat, and you can chat directly with me at any time, among other things. Don't forget to check it out.